Today we will be focusing on the assassination stories of MLK and Malcolm X. Both very involved in the civil rights movement, these two men fought hard to put an end to the massive amount of discrimination their country was facing during the 60s. However, the means by which they chose to protest were quite different. MLK thought that peaceful protesting and nonviolence could bring this country into harmony, while Malcolm X thought that ultimately violence was necessary. Sadly, both of the powerful leaders' lives were involuntarily taken from them when they were just 39 years old. Let's briefly explore the lives that each leader led before they were assassinated.
Martin Luther King, born January 15, 1929, was a social activist and Baptist minister who played a key role in the civil rights movement from the mid-1950s until his death in 1968. MLK sought equality and human rights for African Americans, the economically disadvantaged, and all victims of injustice through his peaceful protests. He was the driving force behind major events such as the Montgomery bus boycott and the 1963 March on Washington, which helped enact laws such as the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 and is remembered each year on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a U.S. federal holiday since 1986. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was in Memphis to lead a protest march fighting for better conditions for the city's sanitation workers who were on strike. During his time there, he was shot by James Earl Ray while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee at 6:01 p.m. An hour later, he was declared dead. His assassination sparked riots and outrage all over the country, leading President Johnson to declare a national day of mourning. Although this story is still believed by most and is what the FBI still deems to be true, MLK's family says that James Earl Ray is actually innocent and was set up to take the fall. Even though all three of the items found near the crime scene had Ray's fingerprints on them, the family still believes it was all planned for him to be the target. It made sense, too, because Ray was a supporter of segregationalist George Wallace, while also committing many crimes over his few short years while being free. After confessing to killing MLK, he took back his claim, saying a man by the name of Raoul, even though investigators say Raoul doesn't exist. But King's family believed that there was no way Ray could have done it alone and successfully made it out of the country without help, as he often got caught for minuscule crimes. So, Coretta Scott King believes the FBI had played a part in the crime as well. There is abundant evidence of a major high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband, Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta King said at a press conference in 1999. It was a theory she maintained until her death in 2006 that has so far never been proven. Yet given the way the Bureau has treated her and her family, her suspicion of the FBI and its conclusions about her husband's killer came from a very reasonable place. They often harassed King and his family, monitored his phone, and his every move. Even if this theory is not true, it is still a shame that people don't know how awful the FBI treated King and his family.
As for Malcolm X, he was born as Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska in 1925. After receiving many threats as a child, he and his family were forced to move to Lansing, Michigan. There, Malcolm's father was brutally murdered by a white supremacist group known as the Black Legion. This put great stress on Malcolm's family and was a driving force in his interest and engagement in petty crimes, while also dealing drugs and committing robbery. After his arrest for all of these crimes, he spent the time in jail to focus on obtaining a better education. Simultaneously, he became very interested and converted to the Muslim religion, and after learning what Muhammad, who he greatly admired, had to say, he then changed his last name to X to signify his lost tribal name. Malcolm's vivid personality, along with his work with the Muslim community, captured the media's attention, where ultimately he learned of Muhammad's wrongdoings, which prompted him to go out and discover what he wanted to share with the world on his own. He returned to the United States with a new outlook on integration and a new hope for the future. This time when Malcolm spoke, instead of just preaching to African Americans, he had a message for all races. Although his work was beloved by others, many found his work to be too radical and dangerous, which is what resulted in his assassination.
Following his resignation from the political party known as the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X's relationship with Elijah Muhammad grew hostile. Because of this, Malcolm X had been targeted for assassination by the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X was assassinated on February 25, 1956, while giving a lecture in Harlem. Reports state that a total of 3 gunmen shot him 15 times. Despite this report, there is not a definitive conclusion as to who exactly delivered the fatal gunshots. Initially, Talmadge Hayer was arrested at the scene of the crime and was then incarcerated. After serving 10 years of his sentence, Hayer identified William Bradley as the murderer. Despite this accusation, the case remained closed, and William Bradley refuted Hayer's claims. One arrested conspirator, Thomas Hagen, admitted to his involvement in the murder of Malcolm X, stating that he had deep regrets about his participation. Though Hagen admitted to involvement in the murder, some are still suspicious about the government's involvement. The Department of Justice has yet to release all the files pertaining to Malcolm X's death. It is known that he was under the watchful eye of the government, so the release of information would provide closure and a better account of the civil rights leader's assassination.
These two influential leaders took 2 different approaches towards a similar ultimate goal. Even though there is one main story that we are all taught about their lives and deaths, it is important to keep in mind that there are countless stories, theories, ideas, and pieces of information still undiscussed that could bring about new theories and help bring closure to some. These are just 2 of the many stories that have multiple parts and are lacking a true, clear answer.